On the day Johnny got engaged, he sent some thugs to hassle me. By the time I made it home from the police station, it was already dark. When I got home, I overheard someone asking where I'd been. Johnny chuckled and said, to avoid any trouble from her, I had her spend the day at the police station. By the time she got back, everything was already set. I stood outside the door, shaking my head with a bitter smile. I blocked Johnny on all platforms and flew out of the country. That night, I heard Johnny couldn't find me. Known for his good humor, he surprisingly went berserk, muttering with red eyes, she must be jealous, just throwing a fit. She'll come back once she cools down. She must. What he didn't know was, I wasn't just throwing a fit. I actually didn't want him anymore. When I got out of the police station, it was dark. On Johnny's engagement day, I was so frantic I ran my car into someone else's. The other driver made a big deal out of it, and it wasn't over until later. Johnny's line was unreachable the whole day. My social media feed was flooded with pictures of him and his fiancée, Emma. Each photo and scene was like a dagger to my heart. I was furious, having bottled up my humiliation and anger all day and needed to let it out, so I took a cab to his house. The door was slightly open, and I heard noise inside. Johnny sometimes had friends over for drinks or to catch a game. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I paused when I heard them talking about me. Honestly, we thought you'd end up with Susan, Jack said regrettably. She grew up with you, and she's really beautiful. But such a temper. She was spoiled, Johnny sighed from the sofa, checking his watch, looking annoyed. By now, she should be here, for sure having one of her fits. Just the thought of it gives me a headache. Strange, Jack mused. You're engaged to Emma, shouldn't Susan be making a huge fuss? But she's been nowhere today. Where'd she go? Johnny chuckled, to prevent a scene, I had her wait at the police station all day. By the time she returns, it'll all be done. Brilliant move, Henry praised. No one can handle Susan quite like you. Johnny, Jack said, a hint of concern creeping in, did you ever think, if Susan is truly upset about your engagement, she might just leave for good? Johnny's mind wandered to her tear-streaked face, sparking an unrest in his heart. Then he shrugged it off, saying nonchalantly, I'd be all for it. Be all for it, I thought, stunned. 7 years of effort led to this answer. I pulled back and quietly left. Early winter chilled wasn't yet the air, I was frozen inside and out. After all these years, with the ups and downs, only I had remained by Johnny's side. I thought we might make it after all. But he had planned to get me arrested as he got engaged to someone else. How pathetic must I have been, to be treated like that over and over. Rain started to fall, the forecast mentioned a temperature drop overnight, possibly turning into snow. New York snow is relentless once it starts. I once dreaded winter. Johnny used to wrap me up in his coat, always kept a blanket for me in his car. Now those seemingly happy moments felt short-lived. The rain intensified, plastering my short hair all over my forehead, my steps faltering. I shook my head and smiled bitterly. How did life end up like this? I suddenly felt indifferent, realizing those little love arguments were laughable. I tightened my rain-soaked coat, a new thought taking root. I needed to go somewhere warm, where winter and snow didn't exist. And especially where Johnny wouldn't be. I blocked Johnny's number and all his friends. A text came from an unknown number. It was Emma, Johnny's fiancée. Johnny is engaged to me now. You have no idea how much he adores me. It's best for you to leave him alone and save yourself some dignity. Johnny couldn't stand you. Whenever he saw you, he'd give me a gift afterward as compensation. I have what you have and more. Don't bother him again, or I'll tell everyone you tried to seduce my fiancée. Emma, Johnny's assistant, was known for messing up often. Sweet and frail, teary-eyed like a kitten when S.P.O. Henry to harshly. Does Johnny know she's this brazen? She had tripped me up more than once. She spilled wine on my designer dress, snapped my diamond necklace. I always knew she was a sneaky little slut, yet Johnny seemed to pity her continuously. Even if I spoke a little harshly, Johnny would instantly come to her defense. A shame about my clothes and jewels. I had complained, Johnny simply dismissed it. You have plenty. Emma's just a naive young girl new to the world. Don't make things hard for her. Even if I have more, it's still mine. If someone damages it, they should pay. I tasked my lawyer to reclaim everything from Emma one by one. Then I pulled out the SIM card and tossed it in the trash. May the jerk and bitch never part. My parents came up, worried seeing me pack my bags. Susan, maybe reconsider this? Johnny went too far, let's find him and get some answers. Our families had already accepted Johnny and me, our backgrounds matched perfectly, raised together, nothing seemed more suitable. Mom, Dad, if you want me to save some face, please don't, I replied. Working abroad with my brother's business isn't a bad idea, is it? Didn't you always wish I'd gained some experience? My parents were surprised I said this, because all through high school, I was always running after Johnny. Not acting on impulse? Mom asked with caution. I hugged them tightly, reassuring, no more reckless me. That's the past now. They seemed pleased. Our kids have always been ambitious. Once you make up your mind, go ahead. If things get tough, I'll cover for you, Dad insisted. I agreed, voice all choked up. Turning away, I boarded the flight abroad. To me, everything in New York was already in the past. That night, Johnny was waiting. Waiting for Susan. Or hoping for her call. He figured, if she called again, he'd be nice enough to answer. Even if she cried and caused a scene, he'd deal with it. But nothing came. That feeling, like a kite that snapped from its string, makes me anxious. Johnny, I can't hold on any longer. I gotta crash. Henry's too tired to keep his eyes open. We drank the night away, but the more we drank, the more Johnny seemed distracted. Emma called, sweet-talking and checking in. Johnny, not asleep yet? I miss you so much, I want to come see you. Holding his glass, Johnny declined, Henry and the guys are with me. It's my last bachelor party. Be good, listen, and get some sleep. Emma pouted a bit before hanging up. Henry leaned over to Jack and whispered, what's up with Johnny? Never heard of an engaged guy throwing a bachelor party. Jack twirled his drink and sighed deeply. What bachelor party? He's waiting for someone. Can't you tell? In the past, Susan would have stormed in by now, temper blazing. But she's not here, which isn't a good sign. Should I call Susan to see where she's at? Jack asked. Johnny got up and headed to the window, not objecting, do whatever you want. Jack first called the police station, saying Susan disappeared when it got dark. Couldn't reach Susan's phone either. When Johnny tried, he found out he'd been blocked. So were Jack and Henry. Johnny, looks like Susan's seriously mad this time, Henry said. Susan's always been quite the character. Could she really mean business this time? You got her thrown in jail and got engaged to someone else. Kinda over the line. Jack had been wanting to say it all night, and finally, it came out. They all tried calling Susan's friends, but no one had seen her. Johnny, normally calm, went berserk, kicking over the coffee table, shattering a bottle. Glass scattered everywhere. He never thought Susan would leave. She always stuck to him like glue. They'd been together for years. Their families had accepted them. As for Emma, the more she bullied, the more he felt he needed to protect her. It's twisted until feelings are all tangled up. Red-eyed, he murmured, she's gotta be jealous, just acting up. Once she cools down, she'll come back. She has to. Before Emma, Susan would argue and fuss. As long as he patiently coaxed her, she'd forgive and be even better to him. Little did he know, Susan wasn't just sulking. She was done. A long journey, I flew overnight. After landing, it wasn't my brother picking me up but his friend Henry. Heard they grew up together, like brothers. Some say they have a close bond, maybe too close. So, I greeted him cautiously with a polite smile. Long time no see, Henry. Tall, good-looking, wearing jeans and a tee, casual and carefree. His cheerful smile warmed like the local climate. Your brother had a last-minute business trip, so I came to pick you up. He took my suitcase and patted it. Hop in? I'm not a kid anymore. Henry's 5 years older. He used to come over a lot and drag me around on a suitcase. He whistled, tossed my luggage into the car, and drove me to where I'd stay. The weather here averages 70 degrees Fahrenheit, very pleasant. His flashy red convertible cranked up loud music. Watching the scenery, warm winds brushed away my travel fatigue, along with the chill from New York. I liked it here. Your brother's house is under renovation. You'll stay with me for now. Your room's ready, second on the right upstairs, across from mine. The room's great, with a big window, though the decor's interesting, in all pink. Exhausted, I quickly tidied up and passed out. In my dreams, I went back to high school, to the day I first saw Johnny. He was leaning against the window, reading with headphones on. The wind rustled the trees, his hair, and his white shirt, straight out of a movie scene. Girls dared each other to confess. I just went for it. Johnny, I like you. He looked up, a mocking smile appeared. Susan, are you stupid? I jolted awake. Even in my dreams, the embarrassment was unreal. I was bold back then. I remember Johnny just snickered that day and stayed silent. Henry's voice came through the door. Susan, are you stupid? Slept a whole day and night, a pig would lose to you. Get up and eat. Henry cooked, and he's good at it. Back then, he became notorious for opening a restaurant when a meal couldn't satisfy him. He liked drumming, started a band. Liked rocks, ventured into the mountains, and got airlifted out by a rescue team. Dropped out of college to race cars halfway through. Countless stories of him being a rebel. Finally, the family had enough and sent him abroad for some polish. After learning my brother was here, he moved his branch over. We were afraid he'd drag our only son into trouble. But I envied him. With a life like his, I bet he's got no regrets, right? Henry, what were you up to these years? I was curious. Business, he replied without lifting an eyelid. Why'd you come? To learn business from my brother. Our talk got dry quickly. Thoughtfully, he said, with your brother gone, you can start learning from me. So, I began my apprenticeship under the former troublemaker. Turns out, you can't judge a book by its cover. The guy who was all over the place is now on top of his game. Started off as an assistant, mostly fetching coffee, making copies. Not much justice for my fancy degree. A new girl in the secretary's office, face caked with makeup, neckline way too low, took the coffee from me, strutting into the CEO's office. Here's your coffee, boss. Henry didn't even lift an eyelid. Before you spill coffee on me, let me remind you this suit and shoes I'm wearing cost $230,000. Handmade. Took 3 months. Can you afford to replace it? The young girl silently withdrew her foot and lowered her upper body while placing the coffee on the table. Henry took out a handkerchief and covered his mouth and nose. Are you wearing poison? I'm about to have a nosebleed. She ran out of the CEO's office crying, her makeup all smeared. I stood outside the door, trying not to laugh. It was a struggle. Susan, your university training was good, he said. I was taken aback, unsure what to say. It's okay. Thanks for the compliment. You're so good at standing at attention, should I transfer you to the security department? No. Then hurry up and come in. I wanted to call my brother to ask what Henry had gone through over the years. His words were too sharp. Henry sat with one leg crossed over the other, tapping the keyboard at intervals with his long fingers. His sharp eyes were fixed on the screen, a slight smile on his thin lips. "Is this quarterly report yours?" Nervously, I said, "Yes, sir." "Not bad," he nodded. Delighted, I immediately complimented him. "Thank you, sir. I'll keep working hard." He looked up at me. "It reads like a classic novel. Rewrite it. I want to see it before you leave work." I was devastated. But giving up wasn't my style. "It's just a report. No big deal." I ended up writing until 10 p.m. "Not done yet?" "I'm starving," Henry complained next to me. Sitting in the leather chair in his office felt like sitting on pins and needles. An hour later, the food he ordered arrived. "Eat before you keep writing. You're not going to finish anytime soon. Can someone just silence him? He's so annoying." I went to bed after midnight. A quick wash, then I crashed. Work has been sucking up all my time lately. It's been ages since I dreamed. Half asleep, I heard the phone ringing. It was the lawyer I hired before going overseas. "Miss Susan, Emma refused to pay. Johnny agreed to cover for her, but you have to meet him yourself. Now he wants to see me. What's his deal? Do I look like I need money? Tell them if they don't pay, I'll sue Emma for purposely damaging property. Let them weigh their options." Hung up, I couldn't sleep anymore. Went downstairs to get some water and noticed the dining room light still on. Gave me a fright. It really did. It was Henry, sitting there working. Only those with guilty consciences are afraid. I silently mocked him. Grabbed the water, walked over to him. "Hey, you're editing my quarterly report?" Henry shook his head, exasperated. "It's for the company's shareholders. I don't want them thinking the company's going under, giving them heart attacks." I wanted to tear him apart. But I had no choice but to suck it up. Do a good job. I'm off to bed. As I turned, I lost my balance. I ended up sitting right on his lap, brushing my lips across his cheek. My upper body pressed against his chest. Alone, it was an awkward moment. Especially sitting where I shouldn't be. It was too sudden. His gaze fell on my lips, his chest rising steadily. I could hear his heartbeat and detect that fresh aftershave scent. Luckily, the water didn't spill. I quickly found an excuse to stand up, his hands still on my waist. "You can trip on flat ground." Impressive. He withdrew his hand, turned away, and randomly tapped on his keyboard. "Night. Get some sleep. I'm off." I hurried upstairs, feeling eyes on my back the whole way. The next morning, Henry came down with panda eyes for breakfast. "Did you pull another all-nighter, sir?" I was a bit surprised. Why was writing a report difficult for him? "At home, just call me bro." I lowered my head, eating breakfast. Looking at him made me want to laugh. Henry went to the office wearing sunglasses. In the break room, everyone gathered around me, gossiping. "Miss Susan, what's up with the boss today?" "Maybe he just wanted a new look," I blurted out. Finally, it was the weekend. Henry said he wanted to play host and show me around for some gourmet food. Just got into his Maybach when my phone showed a call from an unknown number back home. Apart from family and the lawyer, no one knew this number. I picked up, hearing Emma's whimpering. "Miss Susan, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm really out of options. I accidentally ruined your clothes and necklace. I apologize, Johnny offered to pay for me. Can't you just be kind and forgive me? Suing me puts Johnny in a tough spot. You aren't still upset about him not being with you, are you? If that's it, I'll leave. Then Johnny won't be troubled." I really wanted to curse her out. Emma was playing the victim card hard. Henry looked at me, bewildered. I just managed an awkward smile, holding back. Seeing me hang up, he politely said, "Quite the audiobook, same tone and all." Yeah, I chuckled, weakly. He couldn't help but critique, Susan, you're too old for this cheesy romance stuff. No wonder the report turned out that way. I had nothing to retort. Even Henry saw through Emma's act, yet Johnny was always swayed by her words. And Emma, why wasn't Johnny shielding her like before? They want me to talk to him personally, what, expecting me to go back for more abuse? Having half a brain is better than being brain dead. Henry took me to a local mountain restaurant. Drove for 2 hours around winding roads, with cliffs outside. Once out, the view was truly stunning, misty, like a fairyland. The owner came out smiling and warmly hugged Henry. Tried to hug me too, but Henry blocked him. Eating at a place like this, the food doesn't really matter, nature's beauty fills you up. Miss Susan, you're the first girl Henry's brought here, the owner whispered as he served us. I was taken aback and widened my eyes. Is he really into my brother? I mean, I look quite a bit like him. Every couple that comes here can put their photo up on that wall. That's the tree of God, blessed by the mountain spirits, couples can be together forever. Henry just smiled at me. Before I could dodge, he pulled me close with a long arm. And that's how our charmingly close photo was placed on the restaurant wall, receiving blessings from the mountain. Seeing his goofy smile at the photo, I wondered how I'd explain that being a surrogate sweetheart isn't a good idea. Then Johnny showed up out of nowhere, catching me off guard. As I was leaving work, sitting in Henry's yellow sports car, Johnny was standing there, right across the street under a big oak tree. Tall and cool, he was good-looking, no doubt about that. Seeing me get out of the car, he even seemed to shiver a bit. But none of that mattered anymore. Before leaving the country, I decided to draw a line between myself and my past. Sort of like how the old Susan had convinced herself to love Johnny, foolishly, for 7 long years. Even when it got dark, Johnny still hadn't left. Sitting at the table, eating noodles, I glanced out the window now and then. Under the dim streetlight, his figure looked especially forlorn. Who's that standing like a doorman? Henry asked, dressed in light cotton and linen loungewear, holding a coffee cup in one hand and posing by the window. Johnny. I'm a bit worried he might call the cops or create a scene again. Oh. He exclaimed dramatically, clearly having heard of Johnny. So he's the pompous idiot whose brain's filled with sesame salt. I was speechless. I couldn't help but wonder how he had described me behind my brother's back. Henry put down his cup and walked out. Where are you going? I don't like anyone hanging around my doorstep, eyeing my stuff. His sudden boss-like tone left me dumbfounded. His stuff, could he actually be talking about me? He glanced at me in the noodles in my bowl, frowning, hurry up before your noodles get mushy. Who in the world had the appetite to eat when he might go off and fight Johnny? To my surprise, he locked the door from the outside. I stood by the window, too scared to look directly and instead peeked from behind the curtain. I watched Henry walk up to Johnny, and they talked for a bit. Johnny glanced my way, looking hopeless, then just drove off. What did you say to him? I was dying to know. Knowing Johnny, he wouldn't have traveled such a distance just to leave so easily. Henry smiled innocently, heading upstairs. I just said you're pregnant and need rest. Henry. I picked up a cushion from the couch and flung it at him, hitting right at his slipper. This guy was annoying, but he saved me from a big mess. Henry had a meeting with a client at night. Just as I got off work, there was Johnny again. Have you had enough of running away? He was like a ghost that wouldn't leave me be. I was tempted to give him a piece of my mind. You left so cleanly, I thought you'd found someone else already. He stepped forward, trying to grab my wrist, but I dodged. You so much as touch me, and security will have you in handcuffs. Johnny seemed to think of something, his eyes wandering, all his bravado gone. Susan, why make things hard for Emma? You're only pushing me away with how strong-headed you are. Emma again. I wanted nothing more than to shove him back into her arms. You could have paid that little debt of hers, and it would be on you if anyone's being difficult. And by the way, you've got a fiancé. Stop dreaming up nonsense all day. I turned to leave, but he followed me. You didn't used to be like this. You're still mad, right? I know I went too far that day, I'm sorry. Laughter bubbled up in me. Did he really think that was a joke? Hit you hard and then kiss it better, how did I fall for that for 7 years? Save your apology for your fiancé. She called me, saying you wouldn't pay off her debts. Real pity. Johnny paused mid-step. He probably didn't expect Emma to reach out to me. I only did that to force you to see me. We used to be so good. I thought you'd always be by my side. I stopped and looked at him, finding it all pretty juvenile. Johnny, quit acting like you care so much. You kept testing my boundaries even though you knew what bothered me. It made you unhappy and me look petty. If you don't care, then why should I? I can forget you, and you can just as easily forget me. Let's just leave it at that. Stop coming after me. Do it for my dignity. Johnny stopped chasing after me. It's always like spring here, but he felt like he was drowning in an ice-cold sea of despair. Her silhouette grew hazy. Lately, he'd thought about the past, their high school and college days. 17-year-old Susan had a smile brighter than the sun. His heart had skipped a beat when she confessed her feelings for him. But somewhere along the line, she grew willful, fussing over his every interaction with other girls. He got tired of it, contradicting her at every turn. Whatever happened, she'd always been the first to back down. Had she reacted like before, he wouldn't be feeling so hopeless now. Watching her say goodbye so easily, he knew the little tail that used to follow him around was gone for good. My brother Eric was finally back. We only saw each other once a year during New Year. I was all smiles packing my stuff to go home with him. As we were leaving, Henry stood at the door, a touch of sadness in his eyes. In the car, Eric couldn't help but ask, "What's going on with Johnny? He came to the house asking about you, even looked for me." "Nothing much, we just broke up," I replied with a bitter smile. I didn't mention how Johnny had come looking for me. Otherwise, my brother would be even more upset. I've heard he's not doing too well lately. His family doesn't approve of his fiancée. That girl, not sure who put her up to it, boldly went to the media to challenge his family. The Johnny's family's reputation has been trashed. Right now, she's accepted by Johnny's family on the surface, but she's basically under house arrest, with no freedom at all. It's gonna get even tougher for her. Johnny should see Emma's true colors by now, but it might be too late. As for Emma, she made her choices. Johnny's parents had been reaching out to our folks, trying to mend things between us, but Mom and Dad declined. They said our family can't always be the ones getting hurt. My brother looked at me with a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I don't know what you saw in Johnny back then. Coming home in tears every time he upset you, broke Mom and Dad's hearts. But you just couldn't let go." I almost wanted to slap myself for being so foolish. "Brother, don't worry. I won't make the same mistake again." He nodded with a smile, ruffled my hair like he used to when we were kids. "So, what have you learned from Henry lately?" This felt like a quiz about my work. I can't just say making tea and copies and living it up on company expenses, that'd sound useless. "Writing reports." He chuckled. "You know I taught him how to write those reports, right?" I started worrying deeply. Could my serious, mature brother really be gay? "Now that I'm back, why don't you come back to the company too? I can teach you anything you want, step by step." I immediately refused. "Brother, you gotta finish what you start. I've learned so much from Henry, and I'm just getting the hang of it. Let me stick with it for a while. As long as Henry's around, he won't have any chance to get near my brother." My brother's smile grew wider as he sighed. My rebellious little sister has finally grown up. The next day, Henry moved into my brother's house. His home got messed up by a wild boar, needed fixing, so he's staying over for a while. Coincidence or planned? Henry could barely hide his grin. My brother's pushing 30 and still no girlfriend. Henry's not getting ahead of me, no way. Alright, he can have the room across from mine. I'll keep an eye on him, 24/7 surveillance. He's not slipping past me. Near the holiday season, the three of us went back home. Henry got me this ankle-length down coat, said he wore the same brand when hiking Everest. I'm not a fan of the cold, usually don't go out much. While my brother was busy visiting family, Henry hung out with me. Lately, he's been forced into blind dates. But each time, he'd open his mouth and scare the girls away. Henry, not to bust your chops, but you should seriously settle down at your age. Time to build a life. No way. He crumpled a list of phone numbers. I followed him. What kind of girl you into? I'll keep an eye out if you ever meet the right one. With your attitude, what girl would even give you a second glance? I scolded. You're not even trying. But it's true, I'm not interested in them. He said, all smug. I shot up in surprise. Despite my careful efforts to keep him from my brother, he hadn't forgotten his mischief. You can't have a thing for my brother. Not happening. Not that my parents would accept it, and I'd be the first to oppose. Henry's eyes widened comically, folds on his eyelids showing. The interest isn't in your brother, it's in you. Our eyes locked, the world paused. So it wasn't about my brother, it was about me. Honestly, I was embarrassed, and my heart thumped a little faster. You didn't have a clue? He asked, hopeful. I thought about all his thoughtful gestures, mistaking it as just liking what he liked. Should I tell the truth, or will he just yell at me for it? Just as I was weighing my response, my phone rang. Without checking, I answered. Susan, Johnny's got alcohol poisoning, gastric perforation. He's at the hospital. Can you come see him? Jack's voice came through, and Henry heard it too. He's refusing treatment, and we thought maybe you'd get him to listen. Wrong number, call a doctor instead. I hung up. If I knew it was him, I wouldn't have answered. Henry asked cautiously, you're not going? What's it to you? I shot him a glare. He looked pleased and feigned disappointment. Shame, you would have learned firsthand how exes die early, and new loves are better. Stop talking nonsense. I've yet to agree to anything. Chasing him around, I slipped on cards scattered on the floor and fell into him. Reminded me of that accidental kiss that wasn't much of a kiss. The next morning, he went to work looking like a panda, didn't sleep, excited perhaps? He held me tight, even more smug. Your lips aren't speaking, but your actions say you've fallen heads over heels. I joked, I ought to rip your tongue out. Ends with Henry pulling me in for a kiss. I was weak-kneed by the end of it. We started dating, and our family spent New Year's together. Henry's cursed tongue turned sweet, flattering everyone without regard to place or time. Once my parents knew it wasn't my brother but he was after, they did a 180 on their future son-in-law. The most thrilled were Henry's parents. They thought their rebellious son was destined to be alone. But he'd found a great match instead. Gift after gift, celebrating this year was fulfilling in every way. The only thing steady as ever was my brother, looking at Henry with the scrutinizing gaze of in-laws. Brother, when did you figure out Henry had feelings for me? Remember when he first visited, back when you were in elementary school? Sneaky. But back then, my brother wouldn't want me around, and Henry would drag me all over the house in a suitcase, give me piggyback rides. Your 18th birthday, he had a gift for you but couldn't give it because you locked yourself up over a Johnny fight. What gift? I asked in surprise, my heart already racing. He went to the forest to find stones, and it turned out to be a meteorite. He promised to give you a star. A joke I made, he took seriously, nearly risking his life. My heart was suddenly hit, rippling with emotions. My brother patted my shoulder with a warm smile. He's been waiting for you for years, you know. When he found out you were going abroad, he cried and begged me to create a chance for you too. What could I do? I had to give in to the business he offered with tears in my eyes. You've got to be kidding me. Just as I thought, those around Henry aren't exactly innocent. At midnight, we welcomed the new year. Henry set off the biggest and most beautiful fireworks in New York for me. The dazzling fireworks exploded to spell out my name, and then a heart pierced by an arrow followed. Straightforward male aesthetics, I struggled to compliment him. I thought that was it, but then I realized I underestimated his imagination and creativity. As the fireworks finished, thousands of drones took off. The drones showed different scenes, each a place Henry had visited. There were mountains and seas, and he was grinning at the camera, holding something. I knew he was holding the star. The star he promised to give me when I was 18. The drones shifted formations, finally forming a message. I want to take you to see the stars and seas. Susan, my love. Kinda awkward. But truly touching. From dating to marriage, it took less than a year. Henry said he had waited over 10 years, long enough. Even in his dreams, he thought about how to marry me. On the wedding day, Johnny's parents came too. Johnny's mom held my hand, her eyes teary. Susan, our family wasn't lucky enough. Later, I found out Emma managed to escape her surveillance. To get back at Johnny's family, she sold company info to their competitors. In the end, she landed in jail. Johnny's family took a hit, not as strong as before. As Henry and I exchanged rings on stage, I saw someone in the crowd who looked just like Johnny. He wore a white shirt, just like on the day I confessed to him. But time changes things. I hope he understands, missing something once means missing it forever. People change. No one stays on the spot, following behind. Henry wrapped his arms around my waist, kissing me, biting my lip as he pulled away. Focus, darling. I blushed. His sweet talk has been increasing lately. After the wedding, we headed straight to the airport. He's taking me to see the starry skies and seas. The itinerary is all set. Our family's worried he'd take me to some remote place, so they checked the plans for days before approving it. Susan, pinch me, feels like a dream. I rested my head on his shoulder, gently kissing his cheek. Now are you awake? His eyes darkened as he kissed my lips, his hand on the back of my head deepening the kiss. Susan, do you know what I regret the most? I shook my head, breathless from the kiss. He's done everything, what could he regret? He looked at me intensely. I regret not confessing to you when you were 18. Sighing, he said, if I'd been braver then, it wouldn't have involved anyone else. From now on, I'll treat you better, making up for those lost years. I snuggled into his arms, feeling that this is what happiness is. In life's vast seas, who we meet or miss, true love remains. Susan, I've been hitting the gym lately, feeling great physically. Don't worry. He whispered in my ear. I blushed. Who said he doesn't understand? Just a late bloomer, that's all. Henry's epilogue. When I heard Susan broke up, I gave myself half a day off to celebrate and think of ways to lure her back. Then I heard she was coming here, so I took my contract and went straight to her brother to negotiate. Her brother is a fiercely protective sibling and gave me a hard time once he knew how I felt about her. I've adapted my sharp tongue from those days, constantly getting knocked down and getting back up, evolving through it all. Thankfully, her brother loves money. So I kept her close, nurtured her like a lover who grows on you. I thought feelings would blossom over time, but she ended up thinking I was into her brother. How could anyone think to link us two together? Trying to see who'd poison who first? Later, I found out she wasn't the only one with this thought. People really have wild imaginations. I need to speed things up, clear things out. I want my love for her to be clear to the world. She said I'm basic. But that's okay, basic can be exquisite. No one would pick on a sincere heart. Except Johnny, that fool. But none of it matters now, my star has finally come home. Our honeymoon is 3 months long. Each moment and scene pierces my heart. Even the pancake stall owner this morning received my enthusiastic praise. Love changes everything. Today, Eric urged me again to make money, so she can live comfortably. I know, even without him saying, a solid foundation matters. As a married man, I'll strengthen the company, create new successes. My star, my love, will always be together. Lastly, could she stop calling me Henry? Calling me husband would be so charming coming from her little mouth. So, I increased my workout intensity. Life's looking pretty promising.